This is a great question, because I would say that it's we cannot say that it's always the same when we come to planning. But of course, I'm thinking from the perspective of planning in Ukrainian cities, where I have the most experience. And I would say that the planning itself is very chaotic sometimes. So it's not properly organized, not properly planned. How funny is that can be, because it's planning. So I would say that it's usually those who are already involved in the process, they are involved into the planning. So it's very much dependent on who are those people who are administrative workers or deputies. Unfortunately, it's typical, I think, across the world. This is middle-aged males who are very often are in the planning offices. So what I recognize is that we have many bright women in Ukraine, and now we get more and more of them in administrative offices that are actually involved into the planning and decision making. But it really depends on whether they're already in the process, involved into the process. So what I noticed that there is, it's not that other groups or people are discriminated. It's rather that they are not included if they are not already in place. And what I noticed also is that when I was doing my studies at universities, we had quite a good balance of men and women, males and females in groups and technical studies. But then when we get to the offices and when you start working in professional technical groups, there are less and less, and I notice that I often the only woman sitting at the table when we're discussing technical issues, or maybe, and I know from my colleagues that it's often the same case for them. So yeah, so I think that in the status quo, we don't pay enough attention of who we invite to speak, but I would say that it's getting better in Ukraine as many women become more active and actually get their way to get to those tables and have proper discussions. Yeah, I mean, we are talking about women here because, as we know, that it's often, and it's normal that women might provide a different perspective. It's not necessarily that women do provide this different perspective, but it's often how it happens, right? So it's basically our lifestyles and our education and our perception of works what matters more, not gender itself. But I think that one of the important things, as I mentioned, that planning, actually planning ahead of how we do planning makes a lot of sense. So if it's done in more organized way, when we sit and before start making decision, actually consider whether we collected all of the important voices and whether this was well balanced on what we are proposing, this is already is going to be more inclusive. So I think that actually plan ahead would be my first thing on how we do things. The second one would be to actually invite more people with diverse backgrounds. And it's not about, it's always not about just women or men, but what we also did, for example, in Zhytomyr, when we were working with planning infrastructure and working with city administration, we invited teachers who are often women. We invited students, school students, both genders. So we actually allowed them to speak their problems themselves and to provide their insights or their feedback directly to those who make decisions. So invite more people who have different perspective, who actually is end user of what we are doing. And the third one probably would be to structure these discussions in a proper way, because what we see often is that it goes to the very diverse, to very extreme things. We either not asking people who are end user, or we ask them for the final solutions of how things to be done. But the thing is that we really need to include as many people to understand their pains, to understand what they want to do, and then invite highly professional people to make this to make solutions. So I think that properly organize how we make this communication happen, that it's positive and cooperative would be my third thing. I personally find it that a lot of the time, especially at least in Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine is not a very discriminative country, I would say. It's more in how inclusive we are and how we're respectful to each other and what we think of ourselves. So what I notice that it's very often that women kind of discriminate against themselves, and a lot of very bright, very smart female colleagues actually, once they take care of kids or make a pause in their career for a year or two, they start to feel guilty that they are now underqualified, while they're incredibly smart and bring a lot of value to team and to work. So what I found myself that sometimes sharing experiences and sharing how one or another colleague actually deals with all this everyday challenges that we're going through. I find it very motivational, and I can now see that we have a lot of bright women that are in management, that are in transportation planning, that are joining ministries as a. I wouldn't have any ministers in. Female ministers in the technical field on transport and infrastructure, but we have some really bright deputies, and that gives you perception that you can actually do much more because you're not alone in this. And I find it super helpful to share and to support each other.